Hey, good morning. I discovered something for the first time in my devotions this morning that I could not wait to share with you. So let's hop right into it. Let me share my screen with you. There we go. And we'll come over here to Bible Gateway, and we're going to look for First Corinthians chapter 8. Okay, and we'll just copy this whole thing. Copy and then come over to our word processor, put it down. And so you remember what I said I typically do is I'll go through and I'll notice what we have called indicating words, words like but, which indicates contrast, words like so that, therefore, and I'll just go through and I'll start noting those words and the relationships that they indicate. But we'll come back through and start reading. Paul begins by saying, now, about food sacrificed to idols. And then he has this section, and then he comes back and says, so then, about eating food sacrificed to idols. So what he's doing here, he has kind of a parenthetical comment, and then he comes back and he addresses the issue. And by doing it that way, we see up in this section kind of an introduction. We also notice this. Now, about food sacrificed to idols, we know that. We're going to underline that, because he says when he comes back to it, so then about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that. Interesting. And that. Now, you'll notice that what Paul does here, he has a statement. And that statement is in parentheses or quotation marks. So what is happening here? In the first one, he's quoting a popular adage. We know that. We all possess knowledge. Paul says, but, contrast, he refutes that statement. Knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. Those who think they know something don't yet know as they ought to know, but whoever loves God is known by God. Okay, so we take that and we kind of file it away. And then we come down here to the second when he actually deals with the statements or the issue of eating meat that has been sacrificed to idols. He has, first of all, a statement. This appears to be a religious statement. An idol is nothing at all in the world, and there is no God but one. For, it's not but, it's not a contrast, it's a reason. Paul accepts these two statements. An idol is nothing at all in the world, and there is no God but one. And he says, in way of justification of this statement, even if, and the if then statement is a cause and effect, if there are so-called gods, little g gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods, little g gods, and many lords, little l lords. But for us, There is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. Look at these two statements, from whom all things came and for whom we live, and this statement, through whom all things came and through whom we live. You see the parallelism here? That's repetition. What we have is contrast here, little g God, little l Lord, capital G God, capital L Lord. I divided that too quickly here. It goes this way, doesn't it? And then there's parallelism here. The Father, Jesus Christ, from whom all things came, through whom all things came, for whom we live, and through whom we live. Now, we're going to separate that. I want to make reference to, we'll drop down here to the next page and just complete Paul's argument. He says, first of all, not everyone possesses this knowledge about the capital G God and the capital L Lord. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to a god. Since their conscience is weak, it's defiled. But, contrast, the truth of the matter is, food doesn't bring us near to God. We're no worse if we don't eat it, no better if we do. Paul says here in this statement, if we eat it, fine. If you don't eat it, fine. Those idols don't really exist, so it doesn't matter what you do. But be careful, he says, that the exercise of your rights doesn't become a stumbling block to the weak. Because, and here we get into the main argument that Paul is going to make here, if someone with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? And so, this is the effect of this cause. This weak brother or sister for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, final statement, and this is a very strong cause and effect. If what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I'll never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. Paul says, theoretically, if you eat meat or not, it really doesn't matter. Now, what he's referring to, what happened in Corinth as well as the rest of the Roman Empire, when someone would butcher a cow, they'd take it to a temple. Sometimes they would take it to a temple. It would be butchered there in the temple. They didn't have refrigerators, and some of the meat may have been taken and salted, may have been jerked, and they might have eaten it later as jerky. But the majority of the meat they ate on the spot. So what they did is they called a big party in the temple. The meat was sacrificed to an idol, and so there was an element of worship that was involved there. Paul says it's not a real God, so if you go and you eat there, it's not a big deal. Go ahead and do it. But, Paul says, if someone who doesn't share your understanding that there are no other gods were to see you doing it, they might think that you're worshiping that God. And so, don't eat meat. Because when you do, someone might see you and think you're worshiping and say to themselves, so it must be okay to worship this idol, and they would do it too. That would certainly be wrong. Now, that's the argument of what Paul says about eating the meat. I want to come back up here to verses 5 and 6. There is no God but one. For us, there is one God, the Father, from whom all things came, for whom we live. And Jesus is the one Lord through whom all things came and through whom we live. Notice the difference here in from whom and through whom, then for whom and through whom. From. What that indicates is God is the source of all creation. God is the source of all creation. All things come from God. But we get through. Jesus is the means of creation. After from whom all things came, we get for whom we live. Let's separate this out this way. For whom we live. What Paul is saying there is that God is the purpose of our life. But again, we get through whom. Jesus, through whom we live. Jesus is the means of submitting to God's purpose. Do you see that? Do you see how I got to that point? It all stems from simply observing this relationship, seeing the parallelism that occurs in this verse, and then realizing the different prepositions: from whom, for whom, through whom, and through whom. God is the source of all creations, but Jesus is the means that God used to create. God is the purpose of our life. We exist for him, but Jesus is the means of submitting to God's purpose. So there you go. Very simple study, very quick study. Hope you enjoyed it. When I do this on a daily basis, I'm going through 1 Corinthians right now. When I see it and I get excited about it, the first thing I think of is I want to share it with you. I'll keep doing that. Hey, thanks for taking the time to watch. Talk to you later.